All right, so just a few tips while you're working with worms on things not to do. So first, you don't want to leave them on the microscope with intense light on them for too long. The worms don't like to be under intense light. They won't be happy like that. So count your worms, move the plate off, or turn the light off. All right, also, we already talked about don't centrifuge for too long, right? You can crush the worms in the bottom of your tube. Be careful when you're pipetting. Pipette slowly, and particularly for the yellow, the smaller tips. The opening is so small that as you pipette the worms through, it can often shear them or cut them. So what you can do is take some clean scissors and cut your yellow tip right about where that first notch in the pipette tip is. That'll give you a wider opening that won't be as easy to shear those worms with, but still pipette slowly. Okay, worms also like to be sitting on top of the agar. If you flip your plate upside down, they won't fall off, but they're not going to be happy staying like that. So make sure that you're leaving them agar side down when you leave lab for the day. Okay, similarly, worms are going to die if you leave them in liquid for too long. So when you are washing your worms, you want to do it as quickly as you can. And when you plate them, if you plate 50 microliters, that's going to take a really long time to dry. They're not going to be too thrilled with that. So try to concentrate your worms enough so that you can plate something like 5 microliters on your plate, which will dry relatively quickly. If you do have a large glob that you really need to dry quickly, you can take a little Kim White tissue and just touch the very corner to the very edge of that liquid and try to soak some of that liquid up. It's not the best, but if you really need to do it, that's a good trick to know. Also, so dead worms. You might see some dead worms on your plate. In general, dead worms look like stick straight, but the real test is if you kind of tap the plate or poke the worm with a pipette tip, it should move. If you poke the worm with a pipette tip and it's not moving, that's a dead worm. Okay? So generally, worms are moving around if they're alive, and they'll be in this nice sinusoidal formation. So stick straight worms that don't move, they're dead. Okay, another thing, if you do experiments that go on for a couple of days, you might find that if you plated large worms on that plate, over those 2 days you might start to see baby worms on your plates. That's not a problem, but you do have to bear that in mind when you do your experiments. So discuss with your lab partners how you will handle that. Will you count the super small baby worms? Are you going to ignore them? As long as you're consistent from person to person and plate to plate, either way is okay. That's all the tips I've got.